Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Email Archiving Symposium. I am so very pleased to be welcoming Sharon McMeekin to be with us here to tell us this morning about the new email preservation training resources that the Digital Preservation Coalition is developing. I'm happy about that for two reasons. First, it gives me an opportunity to hear Sharon's wonderful Scottish accent again. Some of you may know I spent quite a bit of time in Scotland, and that brings me to the second reason why I'm really happy to be welcoming Sharon. It's because toward the end of my time in Scotland, back in 2009 and 10, I was asked by the Digital Preservation to write a report about email preservation, and it was my first toe in the water, thinking about email and archives in a systematic way. The DPC, the digital preservation, has just been so essential to moving the work of email preservation forward. And I'm really happy to hear this talk about the ways in which the DPC can help everybody from novice to professional advance their knowledge of email preservation. So again, just lots of great thanks here to Sharon for being here and to the DPC for everything you've done for the email archiving community over the years. So Sharon, can you take it from here?
I certainly can, Chris. Thank you for that kind welcome. I'm very excited to be here as well. It's been a great event so far, and I've really enjoyed all of the presentations I've been able to make it to. So yeah, I'm here today to talk about some new training resources that we've developed at the DPC, and these have all been funded by the UK National Archives. So very important to make sure they get the credit here as well. I'm going to start off with a little bit of background information about Novice to Know-How to give you a little bit of context as to where this training content came from. So the National Archives UK, or TNA as I'll refer to them through the rest of the presentation, has a sector leadership role specifically in England, but it also supports archival activities across the UK. And in 2018-19, they partnered up with JISC, who are a UK digital data technology agency focused on supporting higher education research and innovation, on a survey on digital skills. In the broadest sense of the words, kind of digital skills, not just digital preservation. And they were looking at to identify where the archive sector in the UK was in terms of the digital skills that they had. And that survey found that there were significant skills gaps within the archive sector. And those skills gaps were really widening between those who were leading on digital preservation and the rest of the sector. They also found that there were issues with organisations who were purchasing software like repository systems, but didn't really have the knowledge or skills that underpin digital preservation work to effectively utilise that software. Some kind of actual facts and figures: 48% of the respondents said that they couldn't create a checksum. 49% said that they didn't know how to do file format analysis, and 55% said that they wouldn't know how to extract and publish metadata from a digital file. So this really meant that there were a lot of collections at risks. There were some really fundamental things about digital preservation that the archive sector was struggling at. And it really came out clearly that what they needed was training beyond just kind of theory or policy level. They needed something that was practical, easy to access, and would help them build confidence in their digital skills. This survey then led the National Archives to develop their plugged-in, powered-up digital capacity building strategy, which included several different streams of activity, again, around those broad range of digital skills that are required. Everything from digital preservation through to things more like digital engagement with the public. And one of those streams was specifically about training and skills in digital preservation. And it had three elements to it. One was around developing a set of exemplar and basic workflows for digital preservation. One was about developing an in-person archive school to teach people practical skills. And then the third was to develop an online training course. And after a competitive tendering process, the DPC was commissioned to develop that online course and that happened in late 2019. Novice to Know-How, the original course, went through 3 development phases from 2020 to 2021. We worked together to kind of develop the kind of original core part of it. Then we added on some more tool demos and then some more stuff about access and digital preservation. Now, our competency framework at the Digital Preservation Coalition defines 5 levels of knowledge and skill, going from novice, beginner, intermediate through to advanced and expert. And Novice to Know-How was very much aimed at those people who were at a novice or beginner level. So people who perhaps heard about digital preservation, but a little bit of introductory training, but didn't have the confidence to really put things practically into process. And that's really kind of exemplified by the fact that the full title for the course is Novice to Know-How, Digital Preservation for Beginners. The course ended up being much more of a beast than we'd originally expected. It now has 7 sections with 38 modules and more than 60,000 words of content. And it really does focus on providing learners with the knowledge they need to establish bitstream level preservation workflows at their organization. And so it works through from an introduction to digital preservation, through giving them a grounding on understanding what files actually are and file formats and bitstream preservation, to kind of workflows elements around selection, transfer, ingest, preservation, and access. And we've tried to make it as varied as we could, and with the time constraints and resource constraints we had, to vary that content. So we've got, as alongside textual content, we've got videos, tool demos, and quizzes. And I can't tell you how surprised I was by how much people love quizzes, how many people said that those were their favourite parts of the course. Was not expecting that when we first launched this, for that to be the feedback. But we have found generally that the popularity of the course wildly exceeded our expectations. And this was at least partly due to the fact that our initial launch happened just as the world moved into COVID-19 lockdown back in kind of April 2020. But it has continued to be incredibly popular over the last 3 years. And in fact, we had to immediately increase the number of places that we had available on the course to meet demand. It has now been completed by nearly 3,000 learners in over 60 countries, hitting all of the continents around the world. And we have an exceptionally high completion rate on it as well, of over around 60%. In comparison, a study by the Open University here in the UK found that the median completion rate for online courses is around 12.6%. So more than about 5 times as much as that was. And all of the content available as part of our agreement with the National Archives is that everything is available for reuse under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 license. And the entirety of Novice to Know-How is actually in the learning management systems of 9 other organisations, including national bodies and higher education organisations through to commercial organisations. And we've recently had requests for access by 3 more organisations that I've just been busily sending emails out about earlier today. But the most important thing to say about this training is that access to it is free for all. And we've recently moved to a new learning management system, which has opened up more spaces and allow us to move to a self-service model so that people can actually log in and access the training when it's most convenient for them. And that's gone from 300 places available every month to now 2,000 available in our learning management system. And the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive as well. We get the occasional rare naysayer, one person who told us about 8 times in their feedback that they'd rather have read a book. And I think that's more of a problem for them than for us. We constantly get people complaining about the fact that the spelling is international English rather than UK English. But that's the DPC standard, so we're not making any changes to that. But the quotes that you can see on screen now are quite representative of the feedback we've had from the majority of learners. We've had lots of really positive comments on the structure, the content, and the delivery methods. And for me, the best thing that's really come out of that is the number of people who said that they struggled with digital preservation before doing the course, but now felt confident that they could take their first steps And that is, to me, is a fantastic thing to hear, that confidence level. And TNA have actually gone back and done a further survey of the UK archive sector to look how it has developed over the last 3 years. And there have been statistically significant, I knew I would stumble over that, increases in digital skills. And I have to say, hold this place, because we'll be talking about more of that at iPres in Illinois in September of this year. Just to wrap up about the kind of background to the course, one of the most important things coming out of it is that we've learned a lot of lessons in developing that original course and managing it over time. It's not all been smooth sailing, and we've had some really tough timelines to work through and issues to face, but it has certainly taught us a lot. Things that we've learned that I would share with others is that it's super important to set clear aims from the beginning and not rush decisions. We had to quite quickly procure a learning management system, and we signed a 3-year contract with that. And that's, I have to say, one of my greatest work regrets, because it ended up not being entirely fit for purpose. And that's why we're so excited to have moved to a new one recently. We also found that spending time on building a course structure that was closely aligned to good practice, where that's possible, is such an important step. And we had actually invested time in developing the original Novice to Know-How course structure over 2 days of workshopping at TNA, and we based it on models like the NDSA's levels of digital preservation and the DPC's own rapid assessment model. Well-structured quality assurance has also proved to be essential to ensure that the content is comprehensive and understandable. And we've continued to improve our methodologies for that over each phase of the content development. And I think if any of you got to see the quality assurance spreadsheet that I ran for the email preservation course, you'd be mildly terrified. But it's also, we've come to realise that there is such a broad range of skills that are required to develop good online training as well, not just subject specialism. And I think that's been a problem we've had with digital preservation training generally, is that we've had to rely on us as subject specialists to develop that training. And I think it would benefit from us bringing more people into the fold with kind of a broader set of skills. I've had to really work hard upskilling myself in the last few years in terms of my understanding of learning pedagogy, instructional design, and the various software packages for content production that we've needed. But I have the luxury of having time to do that in my role as head of workforce development with the DPC, and that's not necessarily the case. I think it would be good if we can start to bring more of that into digital preservation training. It's also super important to recognise that developing online training takes a lot of time. We'd estimate that it was anywhere from between about 5 to 10 hours, sorry, 5 to 10 days per hour of online content to go through design, drafting, review, edits, formatting for delivery, and the final quality assurance. And finally, the most important thing I would pull out from the feedback is that learners really appreciated that practical content that gives them confidence. And what they also really wanted to add to Novice to Know-How was to hear about real world examples of what other people are doing, to get some case studies in the mix. And that's something we very much listen to in terms of developing the email preservation course. So getting on to that, and the topic that we're really here to hear about today, after the success of the first Novice to Know-How, TNA went away and began to consider what their next steps were to continue on this programme of work. They wanted to continue to support skills growth in the archive sector, and so we're interested in supporting the development of training for those who had completed what we've started referring to as Novice to Know-How Classic, or had a similar level of knowledge already and wanted to begin to expand their skills. And so that's how we started to think about a course around email preservation. It had emerged as a priority topic based on the needs of the UK archive sector. It was a topic that was relevant to almost everybody who was working in the sector. And it's also a topic that's been highlighted as one of great interest among the DPC membership, where we ask them about priority training topics. It's one of the kind of top 5 that's always on the list. And it also was an area of digital preservation where we felt that there actually existed a significant enough body of good practice guidance to be able to support the development of training. And I think if anything, this symposium has shown that how much great work there is going on, real practical, effective work on email preservation. And that there is that engaged, proactive body of practitioners who are producing reliable and authoritative resources. And there are also a number of established tools that would help with facilitating workforce development that we could include in tool demos. And there was existing training that we could learn from. And at this point, I have to give a big thank you to Chris, Trisha Patterson and Ruby Martinez for allowing us to use their email preservation training as a foundation for the developing this course. They ran that for our DPC members a couple of years ago now, and I have to say I've consulted the videos from that a lot during the development of this email preservation training. So in terms of the project aims that we set out, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that we were setting clear aims, as that's a very important part of the project. We knew that we wanted to focus on intermediate level content. We also wanted to make sure that we were maintaining the quality level that we established with that Novice Know-how Classic, making sure to draw from good practice. And I have to say, my copies of Chris's second edition of the DPC's Tech Watch on email preservation, and also the feature of email archives report from the task force on technical approaches to email archives are very dog-eared at this point. We also wanted to make sure that we were taking a holistic view of email preservation to cover kind of establishing a program as well as the practical elements. So a little bit more of a kind of broader view than perhaps we covered for digital preservation generally in the original course. We also wanted to make sure that we were describing implementable solutions. That was an essential part of what we wanted to do, and that should include clear, accessible tool demos and practical exercises that learners could carry out alongside their learning or after completing this course. And we wanted to listen to the feedback from the original course as well. So we decided that we're going to prioritise including some case studies from organisations who were already undertaking email preservation within the course. So in terms of the development process, it started in November, December 2022, and due to the procurement rules at TNA, each phase of Novice to Know Archive has required to go out for a competitive tender process, and this is repeated for the email preservation course throughout November, December 2022. So we had to prepare at the DPC a tender document for that, and thankfully we were successful again as through that tender process. January 2023 was when the project started in earnest, with some planning, initial research, and the course design, which went back and forward between ourselves and TNA. And then the main development phase of the project happened from February 2023 through to the beginning of April. And that was really the creation of the core content with a 3-stage quality assurance process that involves reviews of every module by at least one member of TNA staff and one member of DPC staff at stages 1 and 2 of the review, and then assessment against a completion checklist to look for any bugs at the 3rd stage. Also in this period, we ran a pilot with volunteers from the DPC membership and the UK archive sector, looking at some early content that we developed and giving us feedback, which we then incorporated into the development process. My colleague, Amy Curry, who ran the pilot, also was working on case study development. So she carried out 3 semi-structured interviews with case study subjects. They drafted that content. It was reviewed by the participants, as well as going through the standard QA review process and the preparation for delivery along with the material. And I'll tell you a little bit about those case studies in a second. And then there was also the production of additional resources that would accompany a course. And again, more on that in a second. It wasn't a process without its problems, and we did face issues as we were going through that development process. First of all, we had to work with probably the tightest deadlines that we have for any of the Novice Know-how projects. We were really looking to turn it around in about 3 months. And I personally clocked up 120 hours of extra work time over February and March alone. So it was hard work, but it was good and rewarding work. And one of the issues is a positive problem to face as well. Is that there was a wealth of resources, so many great things on email preservation now, that it actually began to be difficult to prioritize down exactly what we had time to look at, what our research areas could be. And so I started with a long list of resources and then sorted it by level of relevance relating to the key concepts covered within that particular piece of work and the core audience for the course. There were also that related then to considerations about what actually were the essential elements to include. And I have to say again, the final course structure has been heavily influenced by the types of things that were covered by Chris, Trisha and Ruby in their training and the reports that I mentioned earlier. We ultimately also weren't able to include as many tool demos as we'd initially hoped to for a couple of the issues, mostly to do with complexity. It was important that we kept in mind through the process that the practitioners that this was primarily aimed at, having been funded by TNA, was the UK archive sector. And some of those were likely still to be relatively new to digital preservation. So that needed to be in the back of our minds at all times. So we had to make sure whatever we included would be suitable for that audience. And that meant that there was thinking about barriers to deployment for many of the tools that are out there and how that the audience might be affected by those, such as the things like some of the tools requiring a relational database or Python scripts to be able to work them. That would honestly be beyond a lot of the learners that we're likely to have through this course. So we had to then narrow down the focus of what kind of tool demos that we could include. And this has ultimately led us to making ePads the major focus of the tool demos, as it's one of the most accessible tools, whilst offering quite a wide range of functionality. And there has also been some time spent in reinterpreting the available guidance for the tools. That's something that we ended up spending quite a lot of time in terms of developing the tool demos on, because I would describe the UK archive sector as a nervous audience. There needs to be a bit of hand-holding with them, and I think there's a general problem with guidance for digital preservation tools, not just within email archiving, but very generally across all digital preservation tools, that the guidance is written by the development teams who are real experts in using it. So sometimes I don't think it is quite as complete as it could be for somebody who's coming to as an absolute beginner. And because it's really hard that once you're at that level of being an expert in the tool to move to that mindset of somebody who's coming to it cold. So it did take a little bit of reinterpretation of the information that was out there to make it accessible for our primary audience. But we got there in the end, and I think the tool demos are good and stand well on their own. And finally, we did have some issues about identifying a suitable example email corpus for using within the tool demo that we could then share with learners. Everything that we had that was readily available to us was either too big, something like the Enron corpus, which we've heard about a little bit in earlier presentations, or it was too small. We had a few things that had come from the iPres bake-off sessions, but they were single email files, and that wasn't really enough to be basing this training on. So we ended up creating a dummy Gmail account, which we had sent some emails back and forward to, kind of from other fake accounts, and signed it up to some public email lists to try and develop that kind of corpus of information that we needed. And that did in turn then have the benefit of reducing any worries about kind of privacy and sharing of the information that was included within that email corpus. So in terms of the course structure, this slide here now shows the 8 different sections that are included within that final course structure. And from this list, you can hopefully see how we've tried to cover a mix of introductory content, big picture topics about setting up a program, and some of the more nitty-gritty technical issues about how email it works itself, and the different workflows that you might look at put into place about email preservation. And also then at the end, those 3 case studies to hopefully give people the real world examples that they've asked for in the feedback to the original Novice to Know-How course. And overall, we hope the content here will help learners gain real actionable skills for email preservation. I won't go into any more particular detail about these at the moment, but just to say kind of generally, the content of the course within those 8 sections includes 35 modules and over 40,000 words of content. And like the classic course, we've tried to include a mix of content types, including text, video, quizzes, and tool demos. We've included within the demos some showing how to capture email from Gmail and Outlook desktop. While there is good, easily accessible general guidance available about those processes online, we decided to include them in the course for completeness and also for those kind of nervous learners that I described before who really want to be taken through all of the elements of the process and as completely as possible. As mentioned already, the course also covers ePads, taking a relatively in-depth look at how to use the tool, including everything from importing or capturing email within ePads through demos of both the appraisal and processing modules and different tasks that you could undertake with those, through to at least an introduction of the discovery and delivery modules and a kind of introduction to how you would go about setting those up. And we tried really hard as well to make sure that the case studies were selected to be representative of a variety of different organisation types who were taking different approaches or at different stages of their email preservation journey. So these include case studies from Trinity College Dublin, which is looking at a large deposited business archive of emails and the issues faced in terms of security, processing with ePads and managing attachments. The second case study is from Sheffield City Archives, a local authority archive, and that's covering emails from a controversial tree removal project that was carried out by the City Council, where accountability was really paramount, and they went with the option of preserving as PDF. And then the third case study is from the UK Cabinet Office, who are the people who have responsibility for archiving the records of the UK's Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers. That case study looks at how they applied a capstone approach to selection within the Cabinet Office. In terms of additional resources, we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of content as well that learners could download and keep. So that includes a complete surrogate of the course text. So all of those 41,000 plus words that are included within it, including step-by-step walkthroughs of all of the tools that go along with the demos. There's a glossary of terms relating to email preservation, a list of tools and systems from tools specific to email preservation through repository systems with email preservation functionality to commercial email management tools. I will note that this list does not aim to be fully comprehensive, but I'm hoping to have some time to add a few more things before we go totally live. And I'm going to be using that information to put more stuff about email preservation into the Copter tool registry, because I did find that while doing the research for this, it's a bit light on information about email preservation tools. So I'm going to hopefully put some of that over into the Copter. There's also lists of references used in the development of the course, some exercise sheets around ePads listing the example activities that are included in the tool demos, plus some additional tasks that learners could try on their own. And that goes along with the example mailbox that we've also included for them. So that's the inbox file that was created in Gmail and used for the tool demos, so that the learners can actually then go away and try the exercises that are shown in the tool demos themselves, or try some of the additional tasks that we've set out for them. So after all this, the most important questions are, how do you get access to the course? Well, it isn't actually available yet, but we have a celebratory launch planned on the 29th of June. and registration for that is still open on the DPC website, and we'll be releasing the course to the first people, at the attendees at the event, and it's officially available to everybody from the 1st of July. Like the classic Novice to Know-How is now, access is going to be self-service, so you just need to sign up for our learning portal and then select to register for this particular course on its course page. As with the original course, it's going to be free to all, although we do have a limited number of places per month. We don't think we'll exceed, but we would ask that if you're not ready to start the course straight away, wait to register until you are, just to make sure that we're not hitting that number and we have to start cutting people off. We estimate that it should take around 15 to 20 hours to complete, but that is at the moment just an estimate, and we're going to monitor that through feedback and update the information as we get it on the course page. And we've not had a chance to add the new learning management system to our domain yet, so you'll currently find the training portal through the link dpc.getlearnworlds.com, but it's also linked to the Novice to Know-How page on the DPC website. And if you are interested in getting access to the content itself for upload into your own potential training portal or learning management system, that will also be available from the 1st of July. As standard, the content is shared as SCORM 1.2 packages, and SCORM is an interoperable learning object standard that is compatible with most learning management systems. But if, however, you actually want access to the original text, we can provide that as Google or Word docs as well. It's also going to be accompanied by all of the additional resources. You'll get all of them in PDF formats, alongside a full guide to using and setting up the course, which is very nearly done. It was such a rush to get everything finished. I'm still doing the final tweaks to that. And within that, you'll find all of the information you need about the course content, licensing, acknowledgements, accessibility, steps that have been taken, and the course structure I've already said. And to get access to that, all you need to do is drop me an email. We ask for a small amount of information from you in return to help us kind of manage access to it. And that's basically just your organization's name, contact name and email address, what training portal or learning management system your organization uses, and that's just to help us track which ones it's been successfully been uploaded to. We ask for a very brief, and I'm talking a sentence, description of the audience it's going to be used by, and we also ask you to notify us to let us know when you have been able to upload it successfully, so we know that process has been completed. And we capture all that information partly to allow us to report back to TNA as the funders of the course, but also so that we can let you know if and when we make any updates to the content in the future, so that you can update them within your own system. So just before I finish, I would like to offer some thanks again to Chris, to Trisha Patton and Ruby Martinez for their generosity in sharing their work with us, and certainly like making the process developing this course much easier than it would have been otherwise. To Trinity College Dublin, Sheffield City Archives and the UK Cabinet Office for providing their case studies, which really do add so much to the course. I realise I forgot to add to this slide as well the pilot participants who's also helped shape the course with their feedback, so thank you to them. Big thanks to my colleagues at the DPC for all their help with reviewing the content, but also to listen to my stress rants as I went through the intensity of developing this project, especially our training grants manager, Amy Curry, for all our excellent work on managing the pilot and assembling the case studies. And of course, a huge thanks to the National Archives UK and their archive sector development team in particular for providing the funding for these courses, which allows them to be available for free to so many, and also for generally just being a joy to work with. This has been probably the most positive work experience I've had, and it's been great, the results that have come out to it. And finally, this presentation and this course are both offered in memory of Dr. Joe Pugh of the National Archives UK, who was a devoted advocate for building digital skills within UK archives and the cultural heritage sectors, and without whom Novice to Know simply would not exist. So thank you all for listening. I hope these resources will provide useful. There's the links here, but I'll drop them into the chat so everybody can see. And I think we have time now for a few questions.
Yeah, we do, Sharon, but before we get to that, I would like to thank you and the DPC so much for this resource in particular, and for really all of the work you do. I hope I'm not giving too much away here, but the University of Illinois decided to join DPC as full members in the past year, because of the value of resources like this that the DPC produces, not only for DPC members, but really for the whole community. And, knowing the ways in which the National Archives has invested its confidence in DPC and in the work that you do, as well as the partnerships that you've developed worldwide, it really is just, the work is just such an essential element of the overall digital preservation network globally. I'm really, really eager actually to dive into the training resource myself, because thinking about it, 15 or 20 hours of time is so well spent to be able to get started with email preservation and really move into things in a tangible way. I love, like you're mentioning, integrating the quizzes, the activities, the case study. It really is the entire package there. So I just want to echo some of the things our commenters said, like Nathan, about the fantastic educational resources that DPC provides. It's just such immense value. We do have one question here, which is from Aaron. How do you do outreach to learners and institutions? Have any institutions instituted the K2KH as part of their mandatory staff training?
Well, in terms of outreach, we've tried to do as much kind of promotion about the course as possible. And we have had several kind of invitations to talk about it, and we take them up whenever we can. So we've spoken to community groups about the course that's available, and we've tried to take it to as many conferences as we can as well. And obviously, as much as we can through social media and the DPC website, and through TNA's communications channels as well. It's currently in, as I think I mentioned, 9 institutions. I can't speak to whether it's included in any mandatory training at the moment, but it is in, I can tell you that it's in the National Archives of Australia's staff development portal. It's in the National Archives of Records Administration, parts of it as well, and kind of a few others that are out there. We've also had really good feedback from a few higher education institutions who have folded it into their digital preservation courses as part of information studies master's courses. Particularly a colleague here in Glasgow told me recently that they've always found that the students on their course struggle with the digital course more than anything, but the complaints that they've received have halved since they introduced novice to know-how as part of the learning on the digital part of the archives master's course.
Yeah, that's really quite astounding to think that it's been integrated directly into some of our master's programs. I think speaks to the quality of the work, really. So really happy to hear about that. Danielle asks and says, you mentioned Copter. Could you please repeat what or how you're using it?
So it was really about when I was doing the research on the available email preservation tools, I wanted to not only get to know the tools, but also see how information was shared about them currently. And I found that for a lot of the email preservation tools, there's not a huge amount of information in Copter at the moment. And it's always the resource that I like to point people to when they are looking for tools to work for them. So the plan is that once I get a spare minute is to take the information we've gathered about email preservation tools as part of developing the training, and then put that into the Copter system. So it's available for there for anybody who is using that to find tools that will help them with email preservation.
Great, thank you. You want to ask, are there other questions? Of course, people should feel free to raise your hands as well. We're more than happy to let you ask your question live if you'd like to. Sharon, this may be, after hearing about the 120 hours that you put in, I'm a little reluctant to ask about this, but are there any other knowledge to know-hows on the horizon?
The National
If you're at
Archives.
liberty to say.
Nothing concrete at the moment. I know the National Archives is, they're at the end of that 3-year plugged in, powered up digital capacity building strategy at the moment. So they're off looking at what their next strategy will be and what funding might be available as part of that. And we are hoping that there will be more kind of novice and know-hows developed out of that process. But in the meantime, we are looking to develop more training under just a DPC banner, which will also go out on our learning management system. So at the moment, we've got plans in place for, we're working with IIPC actually on a beginner's web archiving course that's hopefully going to be developed over the summer. We were also
Great.
looking at one on capacity building and skills, one on risk management, and also we've had quite a lot of interest in the next two after that are likely to be on developing documentation and on IT skills for information management professionals. So those are
Wonderful.
the 5 that are at the top of the list at the moment.
Yeah, lots of valuable things there. I know the web archiving piece will benefit from immensely here. It's an area we've hoped to invest in more staff resources for several years, but it's always a challenge. So anything that can make that easier is, for existing staff to learn the skills is really, really valuable. Well, seeing no other questions here, Sharon, again, I think, we're just so much looking forward to digging into it. I know the staff member here who wasn't able to be on the symposium this morning. I'm ready to refer her over to it and have her dig into it because I know it's such a big need on our end. So again, just thank you, Sharon, for making time as part of your day, and really more than that, for all of the work that you and the DPC put into what looks like a fantastic resource. So we again thank you, and we will welcome everyone back here at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock Central Time for our next round of lightning talks. Thanks again, and see you in about 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chris.